If you didn't see him last time, you need to go back and check out what Cern Basher and I were able to do with the robotics, the whole robotics industry and with humanoids and everything else. We'll put a card up for that later. But I've got Cern back. And thank you, Cern, for coming again to regale us
My
with
pleasure.
charts, graphs, and all kinds of cool stuff. What do you mean to talk about this time?
Well, I have some more fancy charts and graphs for you if you're game.
Yes, absolutely. It'll be fun.
And we're going to talk about the transformation of Tesla from an automobile company. If you didn't realize, Tesla sells automobiles. I'm not sure if you knew that. To an energy company, which may not be too much of a surprise, but then another transformation on top of that to an AI-powered robotics company.
And Elon, I think it was about four earnings calls ago. I could have been three, it could have been five, but somewhere around there, he made the statement that the new description of the company would be an AI company who specialized in robotics.
Yes. And so that kind of caused me to do some work and do some thinking about that and what that might look like.
All right.
And that's come into focus over the last few months. And so I'd like to share with you kind of the thinking, the work that I've done on that topic.
All right. I'm excited to see it.
All right. So I'll share this slide here. So
Oh, by the way, I forgot for those who didn't see you last time, you are a financial analyst. Your company name is Brilliant Advice. No, I did it again.
no, that's correct.
It's Brilliant Advice. So
That's right.
Brilliant Advice. I don't know why I didn't name all my companies that. Okay, all right, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah. So on the screen, we have a depiction of Tesla's potential business value. This is not revenues. This is not profit. This is the potential market value of the company. And I've gone back in time and looked at Tesla's business. And so these market values may not correspond to exactly what the stock price was, but these are just calculated potential business values. And you can see that today in 2024, that most of Tesla's value is derived from its automobile business.
Right.
But over time, all things being equal, we can see a transformation from Tesla into an energy company, and it comes from three different areas. There's the sale of the storage products themselves, Powerwalls and Megapacks.
Right.
There's also the supercharging business, and that business dispenses energy. And then there's also the auto bidder software that yes, itself is a bit AI powered, so we're jumping ahead a little bit, but it's solidly related to the growth of the energy business. And so even if autos grows, which it will, the growth in these other businesses will likely outpace that over time. And Tesla will just naturally become more of an energy company than an auto company. Now,
And
of course, you could argue that EVs are also a form of energy in terms of, energy on wheels, but effectively Tesla is an energy company today.
so now on the energy company, though, you did not mention solar, which hopefully maybe someday will be a contributor of some kind. It may be a big one. And also a bigger one that maybe should be on that list as well is their whole business of being a utility themselves, an actual wholesaler or retailer of electricity, where they already have that, I think, in England and in Texas at least.
That's
They're
right.
already a retailer or wholesaler in those spaces.
Yes, those could be some big businesses as well. So thank you. Yes, that should be on this chart. Now, we can also foresee Tesla transforming into an AI-powered robot company. And I'll dive into in this presentation sort of how I get to these numbers, but can you spot the auto business anymore? It's hard to see,
Yes.
right? It's hard to see.
It's a huge number and it's
Yeah,
an important thing, but it's
that's
hard
right.
to see.
Yeah. So we'll go into some detail on that in a second. I just wanted to give everybody kind of a visual of what we're about to talk about. So when will this transformation begin? Well, we don't know for sure. But it begins in earnest with the development of two things. One is when Tesla's vehicles can become self-driving, and that allows for a robotaxi network to form. I don't know when that is. On this chart, I have this happening in 2027. That may or may not be accurate. I don't know. No one knows. Elon says by the end of the year, every year. That hasn't happened yet. We can certainly see the progress that FSD has been making, and I believe it's just a matter of when, not if.
Sure.
The other thing that actually I'm a bit more confident about, of the timing of, is the humanoid robot, Optimus. And Tesla is very clearly making rapid progress in developing that bot's capabilities. And so I think it's quite likely, and Elon actually said as much on the earnings call, that by the end of 2025, they could see deployments of the bot.
Right.
Again, maybe that's not until 2027. Who knows?
Right.
But likely by certainly towards the end of this decade, both of those businesses will be deploying pretty rapidly. And so if they do, the transformation of Tesla from an auto/energy company into an AI-powered robotics company happens very quickly.
Right.
So that's the visual. Just taking a step back, Tesla has a lot of different businesses. And this is my attempt at sort of capturing all the different businesses that Tesla has. And I don't have everything on here. I'm sure I've missed a few. Okay. And what I've tried to do is build some models for these businesses. And on the right side are the models that I've built. So in the software, the real-time control platform for energy storage, it's called AutoBidder. I build a model I call Electra to value that business. The EV charging business, supercharger network, I developed a model I call Volts to value that business. And then down in the bottom, some of the bigger opportunities, autonomous vehicles, the robotaxi network, I called that the Cern model. The humanoid robots, the Optimus opportunity, I call that bots. And then distributed inference for cars and for bots, I call those models TARDIS. There are lots of other pieces of the business that I could value. I haven't done that here. I'm just keeping this as simple as possible.
Right.
There's insurance, there's all kinds of other things, right, that we could add into this. I just haven't had the time yet to build models for those businesses. And frankly, I'm not really sure they matter in the whole scheme of things.
Right.
Because the numbers that I'm about to share with you are pretty crazy. I don't need to make them any more crazy.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When I was doing some of the modeling on these different divisions, 6-8 months ago, and it became obvious to me that energy was going to be as large as cars, and Elon said as much. But then you look at semi, and semi-truck could be as large as cars, all by itself. Maybe it won't be, but it could be. Then you get into insurance. Well, you got all kinds of questions with insurance, whether insurance will even go away at some point. But in the meantime, it could become a really massive amount of money. But when you compare it, as you're going to to some of these other robotic aspects, it becomes de minimis.
That's right. So let's just take a quick peek at the auto business, just as a baseline. So last year, Tesla delivered 1.8 million vehicles. It was 38% growth. The auto business, I think, was about 79 billion in revenue, profit of about 12 billion. And if I apply a PE multiple of 62 to that, I get to about a $730 billion market value just on autos.
Right.
Now, you could argue what the appropriate PE of this business is.
Right.
If you're an auto guy, you say the PE is 10.
Right.
If you're a technology guy, you say the PE is 100. I mean, it's whatever the marketplace wants to assign to it. What I'm doing here is taking the PE of the company and driving it down over time to something much lower.
Yeah.
Okay. But over time, as the company grows the number of vehicles they deliver, the growth rate will slow. The revenue goes up, the profits go up, but because the PE comes down, the market value doesn't grow as fast as the profits do.
Right.
Okay. So auto business is great, and by 2035, I've got a valuation here of 1.2 trillion just on autos.
Right.
Again, you can quibble with the inputs and the numbers. That's fine. This is an illustration. It's not a prediction.
Exactly.
Okay. So when I look at the energy business, and this is just selling the boxes, Powerwalls, Megapacks.
Right.
Primarily, it's going to be driven by Megapack sales.
Right.
That's where the big money is.
Mm-hmm.
This is not AutoBidder on top of it. This is just the sales of those products. The growth rate here is a lot higher, and I've got this business growing pretty aggressively to 3 terawatt hours by 2035. And if you recall from the previous slide, this results in the value of the energy business actually being higher than autos.
Right.
Okay. And again, using a PE of only 15 by 2035.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Similar PE today. And today, the value of the business might be, 50, 55 billion. So energy catches up to autos just on its own.
Right.
Okay. So the combination of those two then gets you to, a current value, let's say of 700, 800 billion, growing to 2.5 trillion-ish by 2035.
Not a bad business.
Not a bad business, right? If you just had that, that's a pretty good result.
Yep.
And again, you can quibble with the inputs and the numbers and get to different numbers, but just directionally, those businesses are still pretty good.
Yep.
Okay. And for those that like visuals, this is the growth in blue of the energy business versus the auto business.
Mm-hmm.
So, the auto business grows, but maybe not as rapidly. And again, this is the business value, the market value, not looking at revenues
Right.
or earnings. This is the resulting market value of those businesses as the PE ratios decline on both of them.
Exactly.
Okay. The energy business is growing fast enough to counteract that PE decline.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. We talked about the different startups, and I've developed some models. Let's take a look then at those models. This is what it looks like graphically when I add the results of those models on top of the energy and auto businesses. I'm sorry, this is just the startups. This is the 6 models, excluding energy and autos. So you can quickly see here that what matters most are the humanoid bots and the robotaxi network.
Right.
And the other businesses, as interesting as exciting as they may be, don't really move the needle much on the total business. Okay. Now, AutoBidder and Supercharging are really amazing businesses and incredible potential. But compared to robotaxi and bots, they are tiny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And this is just showing autos and energy versus what I call the internal startups. You can barely see autos and energy on this chart in the out years. Okay. Starting with the results, and I'll work back to how I calculate these in a minute. This is putting all the businesses on one table. I've got energy and autos on the right side in green headers,
Mm-hmm.
orange numbers. And in the middle, I've got the 6 internal startups. For simplicity, I've combined the inference from the EVs and the bots in one line or one column there.
Okay.
But you can see very quickly at 2035 that the business value from bots is about 2/3 of the company's value, potentially. And robotaxis, almost the other third. The other businesses are 1 to 2% of the business value comes from those 2 businesses. Okay.
Yep.
And okay, so maybe you don't think that the business value would be 82 trillion. And it sounds crazy to say that, but if you watch our video on bots, our previous video on bots, you'll understand why that number is not so crazy. But what I would suggest that people do when they value Tesla is say, okay, create your model, figure out your numbers, and then play with the probabilities. Let's say that you don't believe humanoid bots will ever be a business. Okay. We can assign a probability of 0 to that, take it out completely.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say distributed inference won't be a business. 0.
Mhm.
And so I've got supercharging at 100, I've got autobidder at 25%, I've got robotaxi, only a 10% chance of that happening. And then energy and autos, I get to a $5-6 trillion market value by 2035.
Yeah.
So discount whatever you want, but this is the approach I think that is the best way to take in terms of valuing Tesla. You can run some scenarios and assign probabilities to them. It is not really appropriate just to ignore something completely, and this is what Wall Street does.
Right.
They are completely ignoring the humanoid robot. They're doing what I'm doing on this chart. They're assigning 0 to this column. They're ignoring the potential of this business completely. So what I would recommend actually is something more like this, where you put some probability, some value to it, and even a small number results in a big number here. You've doubled the value of the business just by having a 10% probability that humanoid robots
Become a thing.
reality.
And another way to look at it, Cern, I have what I call my 2026 thesis. And I ask people to go through each of these categories and say, what is the probability that we will be at scale on Optimus in 2026? Well, if you don't think it's 2026, what about 2027? What is your probabilities in those? Maybe you said 20% in 2026 and a 50% in 2027 and 100% in 2028. You can do the same thing with Robotaxi. You can go right through these. And the reason I have the 2026 thesis is because I can come up with about a 95% in my head that Robotaxi, Cybertruck, semi-truck, I mean, going down the line, that all of these businesses will all be at some level of distribution, sales, rentals, whatever they're going to look like, SaaS, all the rest of these will be happening by 2026 at some level. And then it's just a matter of ramping from there. So that's another way of looking at this percentage opportunity, as you're mentioning.
That's right. I think that's a good approach. What I'm doing here is I'm picking the out year as 2035,
Right.
but you can pick any one of these years
Right.
and apply your probability to it, figure out then what your resulting market value might be.
Right. Good. I
Uh,
like it. I like it.
You'll notice on here that I've assigned a probability of 125% to supercharging. What's that all about? Well, supercharging network now is open. It's not just Tesla's vehicles. I modeled it as though it's just Tesla's vehicles. So actually supercharging could be bigger than just charging Teslas, which it will be. So that's why in this scenario, I assigned it a higher probability. And so that results in a business that's $280 billion in value. And
And,
yet it's tiny compared to the total potential value of the company.
and just for fun, I challenged Larry Goldberg on this the other day because he's really specialized in this supercharging portion of the business. I don't know that anybody, even Larry, is fully incorporating the destination chargers that are going in. There's at least 50,000 of these on order, and we only have 50,000 total right now. And just the 2 hotel chains have 50,000. I think there's a couple of more, like British Petroleum, that has their own set. I don't know how many that there are there. We're talking about over 50,000 chargers that have already been ordered that would double the total system as it exists today.
That's right. So there's lots of things like that that result in an upside that you can model, you can try to model, or another way to do it is to test it by applying a probability percentage to it, which
Right.
could be more than 100, could be less than 100, however you want to view the business.
Interesting.
Okay. So, and again, I'm not suggesting that this is the right number or that these are the right numbers. I'm just showing an illustration of what these businesses, it might look like one potential pathway here.
Right.
So let's just dive into each of the segments individually because I've showed you the summary. Let's kind of go into each one.
Mm-hmm.
In our previous video, we talk about bots in detail. So this will be a high-level summary. If you want more detail, please watch the previous video.
I'll put a card at the end if you remind me.
Good. So we're assuming that bots, will be deployed at some point. Let's say 10 this year, 100 deployments of bots next year, right? 10,000 but in 2026, and then 100,000, and then ramping up more seriously. So by 2035, in this scenario, I've got 43 million bots. Okay. I'm assuming that the bots are generate a profit of about $12,000 a year each in this scenario. And I'm applying a PE of 100 because at 43 million, this industry is just getting started.
Right.
And again, we discussed all that on the bot video. That gets you to a bot market cap of over $50 trillion. Okay. Now, if you don't believe that, let's say Tesla does half of this.
Right.
Okay. Cut these numbers in half. Let's say Tesla only does 10% of this. Okay, fine. It's 5 trillion in market value
Just for the bots.
just for the bots. Now, some people would argue that PE ratio should be higher than 100. It could be 200 at this point because these bots potentially are incredibly profitable and there's a lot of growth ahead. You could easily argue that the PE multiple should be more than 100.
And also because these are deployed as opposed to sold. So each year you're adding on your new deployment to the previous year. And as opposed to just selling them and getting one profit, you're getting the earnings year after year after year.
That's right. That's right. So since we talked about this at length in the previous video,
Right.
we'll just skip through this. The next one is autonomous vehicles. So I have in this model that autonomous vehicles don't enter into the equation until 2027.
Okay.
And Tesla by then will have probably sold maybe 20 million EVs. I don't know. These numbers for me are guesses. I don't know what they will be, but conceivably it could be 20 million by the end of 2027.
It's probably realistic.
Okay. And I'm assuming that the autonomous vehicle fleet is only 1 million at that point.
Okay.
Okay. And it grows from there. And even by 2035, when Tesla potentially has sold 125 million vehicles, the autonomous vehicle fleet might only be 62 million.
And that those might be coming both from owned cars that are being used in the fleet, in addition to Tesla producing cars only for the purposes of their own fleet.
That's correct. And many have made the observation that Tesla should do that. That actually that would be more economical for them because they wouldn't have to share the profit with anybody.
Right.
Okay. Now, I'm only applying a PE multiple of 40 on expected earnings of about $10,000 per vehicle per year. I've run some models on the autonomous vehicle opportunity, and I can easily get to much higher numbers than that.
Yes.
That's a conservative number per vehicle per year. Okay. Now, it's interesting that the profit on a vehicle and the profit on a bot could actually be fairly similar. It's 12,000 versus 10,000, but again, I've also run numbers where it's far higher than that for both of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I in particular on the bot, I have a hard time imagining in that time period that the competition will be so strong and the need won't be continuously outstripping the ability of all the factories in the world who are making bots. They won't be able to supply the numbers that are in demand at that point.
That's right. It's hard to imagine that these numbers that I'm showing here are potentially very conservative.
Right.
The biggest issue, I suppose, is around timing. We don't know when the robotaxi network will start. Maybe it's not until 2030. We don't know. But even if it isn't, even if you push this whole table down 3 years, okay, instead of 26 trillion, maybe it's only 15 trillion by 2035
Yeah.
in market value.
I think the biggest issue on robotaxis is really going to be it's with Optimus. It's very easy to understand the use case, and that any factory that doesn't have them is at a complete disadvantage. It'd be like McDonald's not having automatic drink dispensers and still opening the bottles and pouring them into glasses over ice. So, I mean, you cannot not have the bots. It's when it becomes a thing. With regard to robotaxi, I think we have a very much larger question of how society will transform into being carried by automobile as opposed to driving their own automobile. And there's all kinds of, we've talked about it on this channel before in terms of whether salespeople or tradespeople, will ever be able to get out of their personal vehicles. There'll be a certain bunch of folks that just won't want to. They just like driving, etc. I don't know. it may turn out that everybody gets out of their car when it gets down to 10 cents a mile or something. But these are questions that I think are a little harder, a little more nuanced in terms of how it all turns out.
They are, but they also aren't. I'm a firm believer in that economics will drive it.
Mhm.
So if it is the result that the average person can save, let's just say $5,000 a year on their transportation costs,
Right.
that the average person will choose to do that because $5,000 in their pocket is a meaningful amount of money.
Mhm.
If you are a contractor and you've got to pay $100,000 for a truck, why tie up that capital when you can buy a trailer maybe for 10, 15,000 and then call up a robo-taxi truck to haul your trailer and you wherever you need to go?
Right.
Now, that presupposes that the network is fleshed out and that there's always trucks available and that kind of stuff. So yes, there's issues like that in the short term to build out the network, right? Just like there's issues today about are there enough superchargers in the right locations for everybody and all that. And we have those discussions, about whether or not you can do a road trip with an EV and how that works.
Right.
So in the early days of the robotaxi network, you have the same challenges, but eventually you get to this fully formed network that is able to provide services to people when they want it, exactly when they need it, and at a price that is too good to ignore. And people are going to vote with their pocketbook and say, you know what? If I can save $5,000 a year, I don't need to own a vehicle anymore. Why take up space in my garage or my driveway having a vehicle if I can just call up whatever vehicle I want. Today I want a sports car, tomorrow I want a truck, the next day I want a van. We're going to turn transportation into a service. That will happen eventually. That
Right.
that is clear.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yep. Um, so those are the two big ones, bots and
Sure.
autonomous vehicles.
Yes.
Okay. Autobidder shouldn't be ignored, but it's small in comparison.
Yeah.
Now, AutoBidder is driven by my energy storage numbers from the previous table that you saw for the energy business, right? So 3 terawatt hours a year,
Mhm.
uh, up from, 15 or so from last year. I'm assuming that AutoBidder controls about half. Now, some may say, no, AutoBidder will control them all, but
Mhm.
I'm trying to be conservative. And AutoBidder acts basically as an AI-powered service that optimizes the use of the energy storage device. It buys and sells electricity when it's advantageous to do so, using predictive analytics to figure out when the optimal times to charge and discharge are.
Mhm.
Tesla will make a cut from those activities. And I'm assuming that they make 7,000 or so dollars of net profit per megawatt hour deployed by AutoBidder or under AutoBidder's management.
Right.
Okay. Maybe it's more, maybe it's less. I've
Mhm.
tried to be conservative in how I've modeled that, but I get to a value of AutoBidder, just AutoBidder, of about 1.5 trillion by 2035.
Wow.
So not an insignificant business, but small compared to the other two,
Right.
bots and robotaxi.
Yes. Yes.
All right, superchargers. This one actually is also pretty exciting, but the punchline is it's only a 200, $300 billion business. Maybe more if you factor in the revenue from other EV makers and those cars charging.
Right.
Sure, okay, maybe you get to a $500 billion business. But again, that's tiny compared to humanoid bots and robotaxi.
Right.
Okay. And then finally, the distributed inference for EVs. This is where you use the computer on board the vehicle to run AI models. Basically, when you query ChatGPT, you essentially, if the model was on your vehicle, you could use the vehicle to provide you the response.
Mhm.
And so if your vehicle is idle, sitting in your garage, charging, why not make some money by providing that computer as a service back to Tesla, back to XAI, whoever it is, and make some money. And so I'm assuming that each vehicle could make about $256 per year.
Hmm.
It's not much,
Yeah. Mhm.
but on a fleet of 125 million, and I'm assuming only half of them use this,
Mhm, mhm.
you get to almost a $500 billion market value on that business.
Hmm.
So small numbers at scale,
Right.
some big numbers very quickly. Now, I've run the same thing with bots. They also have a computer on board. And at 43 million bots, let's say only 60% use it,
Mhm.
it's a much smaller opportunity because the bots, my assumption is the bots are going to be working 20 hours a day. There's not a whole lot of downtime for the
Right.
bot to be sitting there using its brain as a distributed inference tool. So, as interesting as this could be for bots, I'm not so sure it's that exciting because bots are going to be working rather than just sitting around thinking.
So in this distributive inference business, does the computer need to be totally idle in order to be used? Or if it's only using 10% of its brain, can it be selling 90%?
Good question. I don't know.
Because on your home computer,
Yeah,
you can divide it up and you can say, well, I only need this much.
that's right. Yeah, I don't know. I think that remains to be seen. But one thing you would want to have it plugged in.
Yeah,
And so for bots, that might be a limiting factor because you actually want bots to be able to freely move around.
right, right,
So if you can only use this for the 4 hours a day potentially that's plugged in or whatever that is, then that limits the bot's ability
right, right.
to make money on it. Um, so to conclude, this is potentially what the distribution of Tesla's business value is in 2035. Again, you should probability weight the numbers. You should come up with your own numbers. This is not financial advice, but conceivably, the humanoid bot business is 60% or more of Tesla's value, and the robotaxi business is close to a third.
So a bunch of months ago, I started a kind of a series of videos where I started asking the question, and I got almost no interest in my question. But I took a look back at General Electric, who was probably the best company in the world 35, 40 years ago, in terms of their ability to use capital, all the kinds of things that Tesla is probably the best in the world at right now, or at least in the league with Apple in terms of return on invested capital and all the rest of it. And General Electric got so big and they got so capable that people started saying, "Gosh, the value is not being gotten from their capital network, or their capital value is not being reflected, is not reflective of all these businesses." And so General Electric famously started either selling off or what's the word I'm trying to use?
Spinning off.
Spinning off. That's the word I was looking for. Yes, it's probably that. Did you know that I have this life-threatening disease? It's called AGE. Sometimes
We,
it is.
it's terminal for all of us. Don't worry. We all,
All of us, yeah. Anyway, so they started spinning off divisions and they started selling off divisions in order to get the full value out of these tiny divisions when some of their divisions were gigantic. And I started saying, I think Tesla should, I don't know if it's this year, next year, maybe it's the following year, but at some point, they should be spinning off even though these are really tightly integrated and make sense together, that there's no chance in the world that when the Optimus bot is 80% of the business, that even the auto division is going to be able to be fully valued in the market. What are your thoughts about whether Tesla should or might, or when the timing would be for beginning to spin off or sell off divisions?
well, there's two layers to that. One is from an operational standpoint, what makes the most sense? Are there advantages inside the company to having the businesses run collectively? Or do you get to the issue actually that Tesla has talked about a lot, where there's only so much bandwidth from executives, they can only work on so much stuff. And Elon's talked about this.
Right,
Their limitation's not so much money,
right,
capital. The limitation is the amount of time and the bandwidth that the executive team has to sit down and talk about all this stuff,
right.
right? And put plans in place and debate it and discuss it and figure it out.
Mhm.
That's their big limitation. So if that's holding them back at some point, then an argument could be made to say, okay, let's spin off supercharging, let's spin off whatever it is. That could make sense. The other aspect to this is what Wall Street wants, right? And generally, Wall Street hates conglomerates.
Yeah.
Although I would argue that today that the big companies, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, they're all kind of conglomerates
Yeah.
in many ways.
Mhm.
So if we get to a point again in the marketplace where the market's having trouble valuing these companies, then you could see them and Tesla and others start spinning off businesses so that they can be more easily valued.
Right.
Um, so that, it's in time, probably that's the case, because if this company becomes as big as it has the potential to be, then it would be pretty hard for one person, one CEO, one executive team to manage all the different pieces.
Yeah.
It gets really challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know that even in my little business, when I say my little business, I've had a bunch, but the one that got big, we only manufactured about I don't know, 4 different product lines. We imported another few. We had a product line that was 5 million. We had a product line that was 1 million, and then we had a product line that was 100,000. The $100,000 product line got no attention.
Mhm.
It got no attention. It just stayed at 100,000 for year after year after year. Just nobody's paying any attention to it. It was not. You don't want to throw away $100,000 business, but nobody was going to champion it. Nobody was going to spend time on it because you could grow the $4 million or the $5 million business to 6 million and in the same amount of effort that you grew the 100,000 to 110.
That's right. And in Tesla's case, the example I showed earlier, if the supercharging business is worth 200, 300 billion, and it's less than 1% of the total,
Right.
right? It seems crazy today to suggest that a 200 or $300 billion business is less than 1% of a company's total business value, but perhaps
But it
one day.
becomes a great separate business. It becomes a huge,
Yes.
important separate business. It would be one of the top couple of hundred businesses in the world at that point. Anyway, it's just a thought that I have been pushing for a while and never really, I didn't get even as much traction as Gary Black doesn't get on his on his suggestion that they buy back shares. So
Right.
so Gary, we can cry on each other's shoulder about that, I suppose.
Well, and it's interesting too, when you look at supercharging, there's a lot of innovation that can be done there.
Yeah.
Like, why don't we have indoor superchargers?
Yeah.
And then think about the different opportunities you have then when you put something indoors. They're talking about they're building a restaurant in Hollywood, but there's other kinds of entertainment and different services you could provide if you get maybe a little bit more creative with these supercharging stations
Sure.
instead of just putting them in the parking lot of a Target somewhere,
Yes.
right? Like that's great, and that's
Huh?
serving the need now. But really, is that really how you want to build this business long term?
Right.
Right? And I would imagine that Elon and his management team doesn't spend much time thinking about that.
Right. Right.
I could be wrong. I don't know what they're
Sure.
working on.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we have HVAC. I haven't even started investigating my next air conditioning system, even though I think I'm getting close to where I'll probably have to get one, because I want to wait for the one that Tesla's going to build, which is theoretically going to combine HVAC as well as water heating and do both of them better.
Mhm.
Why wouldn't I want that? But that's on a way back burner because that would be another one that would just be fractional compared to the big ones that they're working on.
Yeah, and that's where Drew Baglino, I think, has been quoted as talking about, we just don't have the bandwidth to work on it.
Right, right, exactly. Well, Cern Basher, it has been a thrill a minute. Most people, aren't going to get all excited about charts and graphs and things, but I happen to know that my audience actually begs me for them. They say, we've seen enough of your face, Randy. Please put up some charts, block it out. We'd rather see the charts. But anyway, those were great, so helpful. I think they really bring home the idea that is maybe so hard to grasp the numbers and hard to grasp the idea that this company that's the 10th largest market cap in the United States, what they're doing now becomes a tiny little fraction of the company that we might be in another 5 or 6 years. So thanks again for being on board. And I think we'll have you back again. That'll be really
Sounds great. Thanks for
Oh,
having me.
all right. Okay. So, by the way, this was that time when I'm going to put up that card right now where you can go back and look. We did exactly what you just looked at, this detailed evaluation with lots of charts and graphs of what the robot business, what the Optimus bot business looks like going forward in great detail. I think you're going to love it a lot. And so that card will be there. And then other than that, Cern, thanks again for being here. And to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.
Thank you.